more, and I followed it up with my intermediate license the following year. I've yet to achieve a full license, though I've tried twice. Maybe I will try again one day. It's a shame, I think, that the practicals are no longer done. I found them helpful for solidifying the course material. A practical application is a good way to test if you've understood what you've been taught. Some people are more visual learners than others. So how did I get into editing books for the RSGB? Having decided to become self-employed, I started my business, Lorna Smart Word Crafter, in 2021. And while on the lookout for clients, I saw an advert in the Redcom advertising that the RSGB were looking for writers and editors. I felt this could be an excellent opportunity to use my amateur radio knowledge and gain more writing and editing experiences. After all, nothing ventured, nothing gained. With all that in mind, I contacted the RSGB to find out more. After some discussions with them, I was offered 2 editing projects, and I chose to edit the second edition of Computers and Amateur Radio, edited by Steve White, G3ZVW. I'm intrigued by amateur radios adapting to fit the digital age, and as having used applications such as FL Digi and Whisper myself, this was the most attractive prospect of the 2 that were offered. It soon became clear that this was not going to be that this was not going to be a conventional editing role with which both was exciting and challenging. However, I knew that at the very least it would be an opportunity to learn. I submitted a proposal of my approach and my timescales, which was accepted. Some of the tests I undertook were contacting the original authors of the chapters, looking for new authors, getting progress reports and chasing late submissions, proofreading at all stages, requesting clarification of unclear parts, and ensuring all the images had the correct captions. I also wrote a new chapter for the book, Mobile Phones and Amateur Radio. Once everything was collated and a final proofread was done, the files were sent back to the RSGB, and a few months later, Computers and Amateur Radio was published. The RSGB were happy with the new version and approached me again to see if I'd be interested in helping them update more books. The Antenna Notebook, Great Designs You Will Want to Build, is an update of 60 antennas you will want to build, edited by Giles Reed, G1 MPG, who sadly became Silent Key in 2022. Though by no means an expert in antennas myself, I was drawn to editing this book in order to learn more, and also because an effective antenna is such a vital part of the amateur radio user's toolkit. A state-of-the-art radio isn't going to get you very far if the antenna you're using is of poor quality or the wrong one for the band you are interested in. There are so many different types of antenna out there, and no one has the resources to build, buy, or try every one. We are in the age of overstretched budgets and compact dwellings, which don't allow for some older antenna designs. Garden space is becoming a thing of the past. Though these present some challenges, it needn't be the end of your amateur radio adventures. So, how do you navigate through the maze to find the right antenna for you? The Antenna Notebook is here to help. Over 284 pages and 6 sections, it covers stealthy antennas. Reduced space presents a challenge, but there are good selections of antennas that can work in a small space. Even if you have plenty of space, a reduction in how you can use that space can be problematic. If both restrictions apply, should you pack up your radio gear? Certainly not. Stealth antennas can address both of these problems. Some stealth antennas are ones that you can conceal or that have a low visual impact, helping you avoid any neighborhood issues that can arise from the more traditional types of antennas. Making the best of 40 meters in a small garden on page 7 is about the issues that a small garden presented to the writer when trying to access 40 meters and the results of their quest to resolve them. Loop antennas. A loop antenna can be the solution to your transmitting and receiving woes if the only space you have is inside the home. Though often fitted in lofts, they can be fitted in other parts of the home. The loop tuner and window loop on page 39 is a good example, as this is one that's hanging from a window. What I found surprising about this antenna was just how small it is at 21 inches. Horizontal antennas. The two staples of the horizontal antenna are dipoles and doublets. The slinky dipole on page 77 provides a potential solution to the quandary of how to have a decent loft-mounted antenna for 80 meters. A half-wave dipole for 80 meters is going to be longer than most lofts, around 40 meters or 135 feet. The slinky dipole shows that other, less obvious items can be a viable alternative to the more traditional antenna models. It is worthwhile looking outside of the box, as it were, for solutions. The slinky dipole is also a good example of the sort of experimentation that goes on in the hobby. I certainly wouldn't have considered trying a metal slinky, other brands are available, as a dipole. Though, as the article reports, the slinky dipole may not be the best 80-meter antenna. It will get you on the air and should cost less than £20, making it not only space-friendly, but budget-friendly too. Directional antennas. Directional antennas are also known as the beam antennas. The most recognizable directional antenna to me is the Yagi, the staple of the TV aerial. However, how do you have a directional antenna if you live in an era where there are severe restrictions on what you can have outside of your home? One answer is you hide it. W0ES's birdhouse antenna for 2 meters on page 123 is an endearing and clever way of working within the confines of the restrictions while still getting what you want. Vertical antennas. On the surface, the vertical antenna is the simplest type of HF antenna. There's only one bit that needs to be in the sky, and they don't take up a lot of room on the ground either. However, they have issues such as being very tall, requiring a ground system, and often picking up noise in built-up areas. However, as this chapter explores, there are ways of getting around these. On page 155, we are introduced to some compact helical vertical antennas for 20, 40, and 80 meters. VHF and up. An antenna doesn't have to be complicated, heavy, or large to be effective. On page 233, we are shown how to construct a design for a simple halo antenna for the 2-meter band. The writer states at the beginning that halo antennas are compact and lightweight, making them ideal for loft mounting. They can also be used outside if weatherproofed. The added bonus with this particular design is that it's kind to your finances too. One of the things I love about amateur radio is that it has many aspects to it. If you're not into contesting, there is construction. If you don't want to talk on the radio, there's data modes or CW. It's also a hobby that keeps evolving to fit the ever-changing world, encouraging experimentation and thinking outside of the box. Building your own equipment is one way to do both. This can be designing and building from scratch, adapting pre-existing designs to meet different needs, and building kits. Some of the articles included in the book show what can be achieved by adapting pre-existing designs. Construction is also a great way to learn and develop skills, along with getting the buzz and pride from having made something yourself. Even if it doesn't work, you've learnt something that may well spark off another idea or be useful to someone else. All of my construction experiences to date have been kit building. The process of putting this book together was more straightforward than with computers and amateur radio. It did come with its own set of challenges. When selecting the articles for the antenna notebook, I tried to cover a wide range of antennas and skill levels so that there's something that can be built by seasoned constructors and first-timers alike. I also wanted articles about antennas that met with a range of the challenges that modern living presents to the hobby. One of the most important lessons I've learnt from constructing is not to stop a soldering iron from falling by grabbing the tip. It is better that the floor gets burnt than you do. The antenna notebook shows a variety of locations, both inside and outside of the home, that an antenna can be placed and still work. In places, they're steps away from the more traditional idea that an antenna has to be large and outside to work well. This is a theme that reoccurs in the antenna notebook. Small spaces can be utilized well, and small antennas can be effective. It was important to me to carry on in the same vein as Giles had, and I believe that I have achieved that with the antenna notebook. 60 antennas was a solid foundation that I wanted to build up, not tear down and start again. The book is rightly dedicated to Giles's memory, as it carries on his hard work. I wanted to balance the introduction of new, more up-to-date articles with all the ones that were informative and relevant. With that in mind, I cast my net wide and looked online and in other amateur radio publications, such as Sprat by the GQRP Club. Finding material wasn't an issue, especially when looking online, but it was a challenge narrowing it down to the ones that would fit in the book the best and give the wide scope that I was looking for. In order to help narrow it down, I decided to focus on articles that had been written in the last 10 years. As I had with computers and amateur radio, I learned a lot going through all the articles. I didn't realize that stealth antennas have had some bad press over the years, some of which has been justified. I also hadn't considered just how limiting a restrictive environment can be when it comes to more traditional antenna models. I don't just mean restricted space, but also restrictions on what that space can be used for. What was very encouraging while putting this book together was the innovation and sharing of ideas that has been going on in the amateur radio community for many years, helping radio hams adapt to changes and to overcome new problems and challenges as they arise. Sharing knowledge has always been very important to me, and that's what I wanted the updated version of Computers in Amateur Radio and the Antenna Notebook to continue doing. When contacting those who'd published articles that I wanted to include in both Computers in Amateur Radio and the Antenna Notebook, I was largely met with consent and encouragement. What I also like about both is the collaborative feel of them due to not being written by just one person. I hope that the Antenna Notebook extends the knowledge of other amateur radio users as much as it has extended mine. And that is where we come to an end.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Lorna. I'm going to, before I throw it open to discussion from the floor, and I'm very pleased tonight also to indicate we've got several people in the room who play with antennas, but we've got two who came to the club a few months ago and did an open session. We've got Ken G4VZV and Phil G4UDU, both of whom did a session open question about antennas and what works and what doesn't work, and ideas from them about what could work in their situation. So I'm pleased we've got both of those there who can pick up any technical questions that they want to pose arising from what Lorna has said there. But I wanted to just go through a little bit of myself, really, because I've picked out two antennas in that book, and I want to say something about the book itself. Okay, so I just want to kind of draw the conclusions from what Lorna has described from the book and where I think that book takes you. And these are the ones I've drawn from that RSGB book. And I drew the same ideas really from Les Reed's original book. As far as antennas goes, the golden rule for me, and that shines through in this book, is just experiment. Just have a go and see what could work in the situation that you're facing and that you want to deal with. Secondly, and Lorna mentioned this, the cost of amateur radio equipment, commercial equipment, is, a lot of money. And lots of people don't have a lot of money to spend in this hobby. One of the beautiful things about so many of these antennas made out of primarily wire rather than big bits of aluminium is that you can build these things for very little cost indeed. So that ought to appeal to everyone, really. Third conclusion I've drawn from this is that it would also be, and it's more pleasurable, if people share these things between each other. So if someone is thinking about, I'm going to have a go at building one of these antennas, asking in one of these meetings and saying, oh, by the way, is anyone else looked at that antenna notebook and thought that the helical vertical for 40 meters might be quite a nice thing to build and would like to build it at the same time as me so we could touch base with each other and check how we're getting on, what the problems are, whether it worked properly and so on. And then come back and talk to everyone at some stage about their own experiences with antennas. And the fourth one that I know will appeal to most people because unlike what we see in wonderful magazines like QST in America, or what we see on QRZ.com when we work some of these super stations in the US. I know we've got them in Britain and we've got them in Germany and elsewhere in the world, but the US obviously has a massive radio amateur community. These are enormous lots of gardens with these huge towers on them, 100-foot towers and so on, that they've got with enormous beam antennas on them. How we'd all love to be able to do that. Very few of us can do it, either because we can't afford it or we don't live somewhere where it would ever be conceivable to do it. And what this book does, and I think what lots of these articles in Radio Magazine does, it gives us all some ideas about what we can put into a small space. What can we put somewhere that isn't going to turn the neighbours into raving lunatics, absolutely obsessed with your bit of wire you've put up? What's gonna stop someone in your family getting very upset about what you think is a beautiful piece of antenna you've put up, and they think it's the worst thing they've ever seen in their life and is spoiling the view from the back of the house? Those are the real world problems, and I think we all need a bit of help to try and navigate our way through that. So I've picked out two. Many people here would have heard of Moxon, who was the inventor of the original Moxon antenna, which is effectively a two-element beam, and various versions have been built of this. The book describes a 20-meter version of the Moxon, and they describe it as a stealthy antenna. And until I saw the photograph, which is in the book that I put up on the screen here, that you can see nestled in amongst those trees is a two-element beam for 2 meters up at about 20 feet in his garden. And it really is difficult to tell that there is a two-element beam up there. And if you then go to look at the construction of it, and incidentally, as Lorna said, she's taken these articles from Ragcom, from Practical Wireless, from Sprat, from the American magazine QST, from what people have published in online groups and Facebook and so on. She's pinched these ideas, not pinched them, but asked them if she can use these ideas and encapsulate them in the book from original pieces that they wrote. The book is a strange mixture. There are some antennas described in 1 page. There are others which are 5 or 6 pages long, and the Moxon is one of them. So one of the things that the author of this article describes is that the most important part of the antenna was this central spreader. So what they had was some 6-meter fiberglass fishing poles. We're all used to using those nowadays for bits of wire that we're sticking up. The book makes me laugh because the author of this article had gone off and bought a kitchen chopping board. So the antenna is built onto the centerpiece is a kitchen chopping board, which of course is not made out of metal. It's made out of plastic of some kind, and the fiberglass poles are attached to it with some, you might recognize those little fittings on there. You use them for holding plastic piping to the wall when you're doing plumbing in the house, in the home environment. So they've literally fitted these into some plumbing applications. And then he goes on to describe other bits of what he's fixed on there. But it's so detailed. He says, right, what I went to Robert Dias, there are other stores, and I bought one which was approximately 43 centimeters by 20 centimeters. So he's gone into vast detail. I then got myself 6 M3 bolts and nuts, in incredible detail, the description about building this Moxham. This is the final version of it. So effectively what you've got is there's his chopping board in the middle. There are these 4 fiberglass poles, and they are supporting the driven element, which goes round that side, and the reflector, which goes round that side. And the width of it is 8 meters in the longest element and 3 meters from top to bottom. And that's it. Now, obviously, is included a balun there, and particularly a common mode choke, because you will get common mode choke, you will get common mode current coming back down the coax without that. So he's fitted that balun. So if I go back to the chopping board, in the box at the top, that's where he's got his choke for that antenna. But that literally is it. And frankly, I would be very surprised if anyone could spend more than about £30 on building that antenna and then putting it up onto another fiberglass pole, because it will be very light, and just trying it out and see how it performs and see how it works. So that was one that struck me as being a super idea. The other one that struck me, and everyone will remember, we had Rick, DJ0IP, the founder of Spider Beams, came and gave 2 really excellent talks about off-center fed dipoles, which is another name for the original Wyndham antenna. And this is a very, very simple design for an N-fed Wyndham. So literally, this is the wire bit. So one 10.65 meter piece of wire, a 330 puff capacitor in the middle, and then 7 meters. That's the actual antenna itself. Then a Ruthroff choke, and then a 1-to-1 Guanella choke, which is the common mode choke. And if anyone wants to build this, I very much recommend you go back to Rick's talks and just have a look at his webpage, where he produced the commentary for that gave the details about how to build those 2 chokes very cheaply and very simply. They can be built. But that's the antenna. And the beauty of that antenna is 2 things for me. Lots of people want to put up a straight line.
We missed
the next thing, I don't know if you did you lose me just there? I think my internet.
You froze
paused
for a few seconds.
Okay. Yeah, so I was just describing this. Just go back to this if you can hear me now. Thank you, Rachel. We've got there literally 17.65 meters of wire, and what you've got when you finish that is a multi-band HF antenna running from 40 meters with the feed line at the one end of it. I'm not sure I would use RG316 from the bottom feed back to your shack if you were using this in your home. I might do if I was running portable. I probably would use 3.3 RG316 between the two chokes up there because it's nice and light and very simple to support. But this is the result. This is the VNA analysis of the antenna. So he's done the measurements on this. So it's showing at 14.17 megahertz, which is number one, this one here. It's showing a 1 to 1.01 SWR. The worst is the first one, which is marked number 2, which is at 6.96 megahertz, so just below the bottom of the 40-meter band, 1 to 1.72, and then rising up from there. So that's actually the worst, but no problem with less than 2 to 1 SWR. 15 meters, which is that one, number 3, 1.36 to 1 SWR at 21.68 megahertz. And then on 10 meters, 1.05 at 28.77 megahertz. What's interesting, you'll notice, and it's not surprising this, of course, if you look at the sharpness of the curve on the 40-meter version of this, which is the most difficult in many ways, you'll see that's quite quite tight. So very quickly, as you move away from where he's got the low point at 6.96 megahertz, you're going to see quite a big increase in SWR. I haven't seen the full write-up of this. I would be surprised if that would give you less than 2 to 1 at 7.2 megahertz at the top of the English side of the single sideband. But the other three rather, give you a wider bandwidth, and I think they'll be well below 2 to 1, and therefore most modern transceivers would deal with that without an ATU. The modern ones with an ATU built in with that would deal with that very easily. So I just wanted to share with you my 2 favorites I picked out of that book. There are loads of others. There's the old HB9CV 2-element beam. There's a construction detail in there for the 2-meter version of it, 2-element beam. Loads and loads of stuff in it. For RSGB members, let me just remind myself of the price. RSGB member price, £13.59 for a 280-page book. You can buy it for the Kindle. It's available on Amazon Kindle. Personally, I prefer this in the book rather than a small Kindle, but so I was prepared, although I read most of my books on the Kindle nowadays, I was prepared to buy this version myself because I knew I'd enjoy the information it had inside it. So that's, Lorna, that's what I wanted to add to your little talk, really, my own view of what I thought was the versions there. Yeah, Gerald, the antenna is described as an end-fed Wyndham antenna. It's the same version as an off-center fed dipole because it is split at that point. If you go back to that diagram, you remember there was a capacitor in the middle. So it's electrically split with that capacitor in the middle at the point where you may well normally feed it as a normal off-center fed dipole or a Wyndham antenna. So instead of feeding it there, it's got the capacitor in it. So he's described it as an end-fed Wyndham. It's stretching the point, but it is. That's what it is. And I know Rick, DJ0IP, has got another version of this that he's got on his own website. So that's what I want to say, and just by opening up, really, and then pass it over, really, 2 lots of questions, I'm quite sure, to Lorna about...
Did he answer you?
Lorna about her journey into amateur radio, and Lorna as well as an active YL, because we've got a number of YLs in the room here tonight, so I'm really pleased to see you, and her observations on that, but obviously about what she enjoyed from putting the book together, if she hasn't completely answered it for you, and then any questions people have got on any of the antennas they've looked at tonight. So over to you for any questions or comments you'd like to make. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'd just like to say I've been sort of
multitasking here. I'm trying to cook dinner at the same time, which is why I've been sort of had half an ear of what you've been saying, Lorna. But I heard you mention helicals, and I'd just like to give you my experience with helicals. I made an 80-meter helical out of 2 slinkies, which were stretched over a plastic rainwater downpipe, and I stuck it on my tractor, took it down the local bay, and stuck the tractor's wheels in the sea so that I got a decent ground plane. And I managed to work the Antipodes, albeit with a bit more than 100 watts, not much more, a couple of 100 watts. And so, you know, helicals do work on difficult bands as well. So, yeah, I'm glad you've got helicals mentioned in the book.
Thank you, Bob. I think I remember you, Bob, talking about that in one of the earlier meetings you came to here about I remember the description of taking the tractor down to sea with this downpipe on it. I think I remember at the time hoping you hadn't ripped it off the wall of the house as you took it down to the sea. Right. Anyone else with a comment or a question? And we've got, I think it's in the room, Andy. You've used, I don't know if you're still using it, your Slinky HF antenna in your loft, aren't you?
Yeah, very similar to the pictures in the book that's just been shown. I still have got it. I use it now and again. It's you know, it was the first antenna I built when I passed my exam in 2020, and yeah, it's still a good antenna. I wouldn't like to put more than sort of 50 watts through it, like, you know, with it being just above my head in loft. But yeah, it works really well. I've worked Brazil on it, so it does work. But sometimes, you know, it does suffer with a bit of noise, especially on 40 meters. And it's a lot. If I use it, I find it's weaker at getting out than the vertical that I've got, you know, outside. It is a bit weaker. But yeah, I still keep it for windy days, obviously, so I can still go on if it's blowing a gale and you know, my vertical's down.
Yeah, which where you live, Andy, is quite often. So you're thinking of the winds that we get in South Yorkshire.
That's it, yeah. But very simple to build, as Lorna said in the book. You know, very cheap, very cheap. You know, I built my own choke for it as well, so very, very cheap to build, definitely. And it got me on the air when I first got my license.
Yeah, I think what Andy just said there is what I think Lorna was trying to say, and the book is saying. Even if you think you live somewhere where you don't think you can transmit, I bet you can. And that book will give you some ideas that you could put up literally anywhere. I mean, that tiny antenna you showed, Lorna, in the window, that square loop in the window there is about as small as you could get, really. And you can make contacts on that. I mean, it's just sensational, isn't it?
That's one of my favourites. There's also one later in the book, which came from a gentleman who very kindly let me reproduce his online article, where he actually had it hanging on the back of a chair in the kitchen, and he was still getting out, you know, transmitting and receiving really well. And I just thought, I would have never, you know, you wouldn't think of sticking an antenna on the back of a kitchen chair, and yet he was having such a great time with it. I just thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, you can see when I was looking at that end-fed Wyndham, and I'm not sure what advantage it gives you over a 40-meter end-fed half wave. So I know a number of people in the room here. I'm looking at Mike and Adriana in Germany. I know you use a 40-meter end-fed half wave at home as your antenna, because you've literally got one piece of wire to put up, and if it's a nice thin bit of wire, it's not going to carry much visual concern with it for any of your neighbours, and therefore very simple to put up. I'm not 100% certain whether that end-fed Wyndham gives you anything more than that end-fed half wave you've got puts up, but it's worth investigating, isn't it, just to see whether it does add anything to it, whether it performs any better. and so on. And the beauty of playing with these wire antennas is that you can put them together very cheaply, and you can make them without too much fuss. Right, anyone else wants a question, comments?
One thing I will say on the wires, it's come up down here. People forget. The one thing you need to do with wire, I know you can go to the radio shop and you can buy the magic antenna wire, but why? Just befriend your local scrapyard. All scrapyards buy in wire from electric contractors and they will resell it to you at their buy-in price plus a bit. And I've bought reels of cable for making wire antennas, and I don't care if it's pink, yellow. In fact, my 40-meter low end-fed half wave at the moment is yellow and black striped. I don't care what color it is, but the cable is so cheap. It's just so cheap. And all they do, if you leave it there, is they burn the insulation off, which they shouldn't, and then makes it into copper scrap. But, scrapyards are a brilliant source of antenna wire. And I'm always going and buying them because I'm playing about with this, that, all sorts of things. And quite often you put something up at the end of it. Yeah, it worked that well. So what? Just scrunch it up and it goes back in the scrap bin. But I've paid so little for it. But just don't go buying special reels of magic antenna wire at 20, 30, 40 pounds a reel when you can go down the scrapyard and get it for £3 or £4.
Thank you, Phil, for that observation. I remember you making that observation in the previous discussion. And yeah, go on, Gerald.
Yeah, I'd just like to confirm what Phil said and add the point that I managed to get quite a lot of old mains cable when they changed to the new colours, and it didn't even pay a scrap price for it. They were throwing it out. So I've got lots and lots of cable which is red and black. So now I suppose when they change the colours from blue and whatever, brown and things now to a different colour, then we'll have another load of scrap coming as well. But it's really good stuff. Only thing is, it tends not to be too good for aerials unless you stretch it. I put it in the vise at one end and put a good tug on it till it becomes a bit more hard drawn, so that it doesn't stretch once it's up there.
I actually picked up a reel of cable. They said, we've got this cable of weird stuff. It's very heavy, so it is going to cost you a bit. But if you want it and you know what it is it any good? It was 80 meters of RG214. Sold off as scrap.
Wow.
Double insulated, double coax rather, grade. And they said they didn't know what it was. It was just basically, it was darned heavy. It was on a wooden reel, and it was going to be a lot of hassle for them to take off. But we'll weigh it up, and if you're interested, you can buy it. Too right, I had it out of there damn quick.
Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you, George. Yeah, Mike.
I wanted to add, we once used a clothesline. It was 20 meters long, made a perfect end-fed antenna, and in combination with the 1-49 Anan, we use it in the garden, and it worked well. It was insulated wire, very cheap, to be had at the supermarket for €2. So really cheap and not so effective as DX wire. That's understood, but nevertheless, it worked.
Gerald again.
Yeah, just to add to that, I got some, and it was steel wire, and it won't work very well. It worked a lot better than I expected. Actually, it was really quite good, but the resistance in it is slightly higher than copper, and that actually made it more broad-banded, so the SWR stayed low across the whole of the 40 and 80 meter bands. Back to you, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you don't discover these things until you try it, do you? That's the starting point to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, Roger.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I would just comment on the copper first. Yes, soft copper as used in wire is not good for aerials in the air, as in stretched, like Gerald says. You need to pre-stretch it or hang it on something else, because it will stretch and it will work hard and it will break, as we all know. But steel's a good solution. It's like I don't know what the post office use, but all these overhead wires that the post office are taking down over the next few years, they'll be scrapping them, of course, and that's good stuff because it's quite hard drawn and it's good for stringing between lampposts. At work, we get copper about £10 a kilo we're paying at the moment. It goes back to them about £4 a kilo a scrap value. If you've nicked it or it's got plastic on it, about half again, so about £2 a kilo to unscrupulous scrap dealers. But obviously not all scrap dealers know what they're dealing with. Like Phil says, you can get some bargains. It's worth talking to. Yeah, what you were talking about, Lorna, was the fact that amateur radio has so many facets to it. Yes, and it's always evolving. I do find, of course, that some people, not all, but some people do seem to be stuck in a rut, and they just want to just do what they did 40 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever time they came into it. They just want to stick. And yet the whole point of amateur radio is investigation, self-experiment, learning about stuff. So I'm fully with you on the experimentation. But with regard to books, like Nick says, many people now read them online, and the publication side of it, the physical publication. I'm old school, so I think there's still a place for that, and there always will be. But do you think it's declining? Do you see that in book sales generally, when we've only got sort of 2 magazines in the UK now that cover amateur radio at all? Do you see a decline in publications as well, this physical publication? I just wondered what your thought was on that.
Well, yes, is the short answer. I mean, in one of the other hats that I happen to hold as a self-employed editor, I have edited quite a lot of books, not just the 2 for the RSGB, and certainly mixing with other authors. There is definitely a drive to digital publication, a lot more than there is to the physical. What I like about the RSGB is that though they have moved to doing digital publications, they are at least still doing them alongside the physical ones. So they haven't sacrificed one for the other. I mean, the other publication that you may not be aware of, and I did mention it in my talk, was Sprat, which is done by, and I'll probably get this acronym wrong again, I think it's the the GQPR. So that's for low voltage usage. And that's only, if I remember correctly, about £6.50 a year. Right. And you get 4 issues. And I don't mind saying so myself, they are brilliant. I wish I had one to hand to wave at you, but I don't. But I found them to be really informative. And again, that's a physical publication. And, there we go. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's them. And I love getting mine. I look forward to mine coming through. And I think maybe that's the way things will go for amateur radio when it comes to physical publications. Yep, there we go. It's a year younger than me. Is that's what will happen, maybe, that small, more independent chains, groups of users might pick up where we're not getting so many physical publications. But I hope that that's kind of a long way off. I'd like to continue seeing physical books for a while longer.
Yeah, I think the problem is that the beauty, or rather the beauty of the physical book, is this was published in '83, as you saw the copyright notice there. So I've had that 40 years. The website, though, has changed dramatically. Now, GQRP Club is very old school. They've got everything online and will continue to do so. But for lots and lots of things, if you publish it online, it's very, very ephemeral. I mean, stuff you publish on Facebook is here today, gone tomorrow. But as soon as you stop paying somebody for hosting your website, it's gone. That's it. So the physical thing, I think, has a place for a long time to come. And I think people would throw that away, at a great cost to society generally. It's nice to have those physical publications, and that's why I like books. I think they're great, and they have longevity. None of my kids are interested in that, but if they were, I could pass it on to them. But there you go. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Roger, I agree with you. I agree with the points that Lorna was making, and that is one of the big problems, isn't it, of the internet, is that particularly nowadays, because you've got the internet access on your phone, most people have on their phones, and therefore you can scroll through things. You find something interesting and it's gone. And the next day you remember, oh, I read that interesting article, and you want to try and find it. No way can you find that piece that you found interesting the day before. I mean, personally, this is my personal observation. I love the magazines on digital. So I get Practical Wireless, I get QST on my iPad, and I love that. It comes instantaneously. It's got fantastic indexing. You can search for articles and people easily enough immediately and get it straight up in front of you. So I love it for that. But when it comes to books, like handbooks, like the Radio Communication Handbook, the ARRL Handbook, the Antenna Handbook, and so on, I don't think you can beat a physical book just because the way you would look at it and the way you go back to it, it works better. Certainly does for me. So although I'm a great advocate of digital publication, I love reading novels on my Kindle. I can I can read, a novel every couple of days on the Kindle and enjoy it. I can go on holiday in a couple of weeks' time and take, thousands of books with me and read whatever I want to read. That's fabulous for that. But if I want to read something like this Antenna notebook, or I'm a bit disappointed I didn't do this, but we had David Fry give a talk last week about the book he's written on G2NM. And actually, I bought the version from Amazon, which is a black and white published version. He is selling for exactly the same price as I paid on Amazon. I didn't know this when I bought it from them. He's selling directly a color version of the same book. So the printing quality is going to be a lot better. It's going to look a lot nicer for a piece of radio history. And I'm a great fan of keeping those types of things as real books. But I think that the digital stuff has certainly got its place there, even though what Roger said is true. A lot of it is very ephemeral, and what we find tomorrow is gone the next day.
Yeah, it really struck me this week. There's a local website, the village that I live in. A guy produced a website for just specifically for the village. He typed hundreds and hundreds, thousands of words in, hundreds of pages of data, and it's disappeared in the last year. He spent a decade building it up, a bit more than a decade, and it's gone. It's just disappeared. Somebody asked me about it. I said, "Oh, just look on so it's gone. It's not there." I don't know what's happened to him. I only found out yesterday, but it's gone. Everything's gone. Now, the Internet Archive can find some archive pages, but it's not the same experience. So, yeah, the physical book is worth a lot. So, thanks, Lorna.
Yeah, Bob, up in Scotland. You're on mute, Bob. You're still on mute. Bob, you unmuted and now you're muted again. Just try it again.
Try that.
That's
Right.
it.
Am I
Yep.
all right now?
5 and 9.
Hey, thank God for that. Old age. Sorry, what can I do? Every day I'm nearer 80 than 70. That's my excuse. Anyway, just a bit of information on books on the internet, which people might find useful. I'm sure quite a few of you will know a website called archive.org in the States. Well, on there are the first 3 volumes of the ARRL Antenna Compendium for free. You can download a PDF for free. And interestingly enough, the RSGB bookshop is still selling those volumes, and they're about 16 quid each. So you can get them for note if you go on archive.org. You can't get the later volumes of it, unfortunately, but certainly those first 3. And of course, antenna articles never really date, so it's always useful to know. And indeed, I noticed on the archive.org website as well, although I didn't click on it, earlier versions of the ARRL Antenna Handbook. The latest one I found there is the 2018 version, I mean, that book costs a fortune, and it looks to me as though you can get it for free off that website. So that's a bit of information if anyone's interested. And the other thing is, Nick, that end-fed wind on that you showed us, I'm wondering, I noticed, your curve of all your low SWRs. I wonder if anyone's ever investigated that antenna or any others in terms of what, you've got the low SWRs and resonance, but what does the polar diagram of the antenna look like? I wonder whether anyone's tried modeling any of those to see whether it's producing anything meaningful in terms of low angle radiation or what have you.
I think the answer is yes, they have, and I'm pretty sure that Rick DJ0IP on his amazing website, and Roger, you were talking about websites disappearing. If sadly, at some stage Rick passes away, if his websites were lost, it would be absolutely awful, because the amount of data and information that he has collected over the years is just phenomenal. That would be a sad day. Bob, I'm an ARRL member. Every now and again, they do offer, the last time they offered their latest version of the antenna handbook for, I think it was like 40% off the normal price of the digital version of it. So I bought the digital version for, I can't remember, it was a very small amount of money, nothing like the full cost of it. Obviously not the physical ones, because that would have cost me, well over £100 in postage on top of it, but the digital versions, and they are it's a very good book. And if you on any antenna, the beauty of the ARRL handbook, like the radio communication handbook the RSGB produced, but the ARRL handbook, antenna handbook, has got so much detail in there from people who really are some of the kind of forerunners of the hobby that we enjoy. The people who, like Roy Llewellyn, who produced the software for modeling that Bob was just talking about. Articles by people like that, people like G3TXQ, who is the man famed for the hex beam and so much more. The work that he did, the work of the person that Rick DJ0IP references a lot, Sevic, who wrote the books on balance and Unnans and so on. I mean, a lot of the material in those books is deeply theoretical, and without that understanding of physics, you're going to struggle to understand all that stuff. But nevertheless, like everything else, there's something in there for everyone. So that's kind of the reason why these little books. I mean, actually, Lorna, I don't think you edited this one, but there's another excellent book produced by the RSGB called Portable Antennas for Everyone, that Steve Telenius Lowe edited, PJ4DX. And there are some fantastic ideas in there as well for portable antennas. Lots of verticals, lots of wire beams and so on. And I think, those two books that I've got, the antenna notebook and the portable antenna notebook, for me, they've got everything in there that I would really want to spend hours experimenting with and playing with. So I for the similar amount of money, 10, 12, 13 pounds, you can't go wrong in my view. It's money worth spending. I mean, goodness sake, there will be people starting off in the hobby who, go to one of the big amateur radio dealers and buy themselves a G5 RV for £100 or something. I really do say to you, please don't go and do that. If you're here in this club and you've got people like Phil and people like Ken and others of us here that have been around for a long time, we'll all produce for you information much better.
I do have a comment on archive.org. They're currently in court. They had to remove 30,000 books from their lending library. They also have a lending library where you can only keep the book for, say, 2 weeks and you have to return it. They had to remove 30,000 books. They were in court trying to fight it because they're acting just like a regular publishing company would with their books in a regular library. But for some reason, I guess there are a lot of companies that are trying to stop them from loaning books. But like Bob said, the other section, of course, those books probably will stay on there forever. But if it's one that you normally would have to borrow from a library, they may have already had to remove it from archive.org, but it's a great source.
Yeah, and there's, sorry, we mentioned this last week, and I couldn't remember the name of the website, and I haven't looked since. But there's also that fabulous website based in America as well, which has hoovered up the original copies of all the radio magazines going back in the last 70 years. Is it something like AmericanRadioHistory.org or something? It's got, for the UK readers, it's got Ham Radio Today, Shortwave Magazine, Practical Wireless. All those magazines are on there. But I can't remember the
As I
URL.
recall, it's very similar to the name that you just mentioned.
Yeah, it's something like that. I'm sure if you Googled it, we said this last week, if you Googled it, you'll find it. I must go and have a look again myself. But you know, these online archives are fantastic.
Yeah, just to mention that Nick, if anybody wants to, if you've got a website, you think I'd like to take a copy of that. I don't know if you all know this, but there's a very simple command you can use to download the whole of the website, to basically replicate the website to your local computer and grab a snapshot of it. And some of you will know this already. It's called wget, WGET. That's the command on Linux systems. And that there are open source versions of that on Windows called curl, CURL. So if you search those commands, you can download the whole of a website. So you can grab dj0ip.de's website, the whole thing in one line command line, and download the whole lot, and you've got a record of it, you've got an archive of it. It's you know, for those people who, you know, haven't, I think it might be ephemeral and haven't got an archive themselves, if you think it's useful to you, by all means use it.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. Right, anyone else with a comment or question, particularly to Lorna, but anyone here who wants to make any comment, please fire away.
Yeah, I've just popped the URL on chat actually for
Yeah,
the
thank you, Phil. Yeah.
archive. Yeah.
Who was that? Jeff in Belgium, 018NT.
Okay, Lorna, thank you very much. Very interesting information, very interesting book. And one thing you also, if you want to buy the Kindle book, if you go to the Kindle page, you can actually download the free teaser of the book if you want. So, and very often it's 30 to 40 pages of the book, which will give you an idea if that is the book you want. And so that's sometimes you already have some very interesting information in these 30 or 40 pages. Another thing, Lorna, I'm just wondering what kind of antennas are you using in your shack and why?
Yes, we are in a transition at the moment with antennas because my partner is unfortunately very unwell. So radio usage isn't high at the moment. Though my main interest actually has been more in digital modes. I've not got it up at the moment, but I do have a little indoor whip that I use if I'm doing data modes. I mentioned earlier about FLDG and is it Whisper WSPR. That and construction's been my mainstay. I also have a little Bofang, so a little handheld job, which does for most of the times when I have been either listening or broadcasting, I should say, talking to others, such as the nets that they ran. Used to be part of those a while ago, but I must admit at the moment we're not doing a lot of actual active work that's requiring antennas at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Lorna. I wish your friend or your partner well.
Jeff, for Lorna's benefit, because she doesn't know this, but Lorna, Jeff lives in a flat, and his antennas all have to go on the balcony of the flat. So there won't be many people in the room who've got a smaller garden than Jeff has got to put antennas on. So Jeff, just give Lorna a flavour of what you can do from your home QTH.
Well, on HF, I'm using these Ampro sticks. So I have a set of different Ampro sticks, which are mounted on the railing of the balcony. The balcony is 7 by 3 meters great or small. And I have a second balcony on the other side of the building. So I'm on the top floor, which is also, if you ever move to an apartment or a flat, go to the top floor. Very, very good tip. So for HF, the Ampro sticks, which are doing quite well. For VHF, UHF, I have a 5-element log periodic antenna, which is working on 2 and on 70 centimeters, which is about 1 square meter great. I put that on a tripod. I can mount it in vertical or horizontal position. Actually, this afternoon, I worked into the south of France, 800, 900 kilometers on FT8. So I'm doing a lot of digital modes. For 23 centimeters, I have a panel antenna, as they call it, which is about 50 by 50 centimeters and which gives 16 dBi again. I worked into the UK with that on 23 centimeters. And I have a vertical for a V2000 for 6 meters, 2 meters, 70 centimeters. And I use that for satellite, also for digital mode. So I'm using FT4 on some satellites and worked into the States and in Qatar and things like that. So, but the key, of course, in my case, is I'm also using quite a lot of digital. And I take part in contests like the RITI contests. I take part in that because that is a good way to, to get some new countries and so on. But I have a lot of fun with that, and I'm able to work with maybe maximum 20 watts on HF, not more than that. Working into the States, working into VK, yeah. So it's possible. It's possible.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, Jeff is a shining light when he comes along and tells us the DX he's worked from his block of flats, because you know he's got very, very small antennas and ability, and Jeff also manages to. I mean, I'm just give you an example of this. I mean, I started doing, along with a number of others in the room here, parks on the air as a fun thing to do, go and work portable in parks, and I think not quite all of them, but every activation I've made, Jeff has always found me and worked me.
On 40 meters.
on 40, I think you've worked me on 20 as well, but on 40 meters
true.
last week, but on 20 meters as well. Both on sideband and on CW, if I remember rightly. I think you've worked me on CW as well.
Right.
It just goes to show that however limited you are, you have got a way of transmitting RF, and therefore you're going to do, for what you've got, your restriction obviously in the amount of power that you can use with the antenna you've got in your location, you're obviously going to do a lot better on digital modes, which are very, very small bandwidth, and you're going to do better on CW than you are on single sideband. That's for sure.
I worked Bob November 4 X-ray Alpha Tango a couple of times, both on his battleship and from his home. So it's possible.
Yeah, he's got the QSL card there.
Yeah.
Well, that's when you worked us from the, that's my QSL card, yeah. And yours, there's yours, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got your QSL card on the wall here as well, Jeff. So, and Bob's, you're underneath Bob. So there you go. Right. Anyone else got any other questions or comments they want to put to Lorna? If not, Lorna, do you want to just say a couple of words before you sign off tonight and and then I'll say a couple of words to you afterwards.
Yeah, thank you. Is that the this is as you might have been able to tell by my flawless presentation, this is the first one I've ever done. So thank you for not laughing too much when I tripped over my tongue more than once. It's been really nice to be able to talk about my journey into amateur radio, my editing journey, and the book. When I became a ham, oh yeah, about a decade ago now. Wow, that's long ago. I never thought that my passion for writing and my passion for sharing knowledge and amateur radio would end up being so close together. And by doing things like talking to you tonight and hopefully perhaps to other clubs, I can continue sharing that knowledge, not just for promoting the books, but, for, I think, keeping the spirit of the hobby, of sharing knowledge, of collaborating, of trying things out. So I'm really grateful to have been given that opportunity tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, Lorna. And I'm very, very pleased that you were able to give the talk today, and I'm sure it's much appreciated. Can we show our appreciation to Lorna in the normal way? So thank you, Lorna. Okay, on that, I'm going to thank everyone who's watching on YouTube. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And thank you to our viewers who watch this recording whenever they watch it in the coming weeks. And I hope you get some ideas and inspiration from it. But my one recommendation, and I've got no, other than being a member of the Radio Society of Great Britain, I have got no financial interest in this. I really do recommend those two books I said, Lorna's Antenna Notebook she edited and the Portable Antennas for Everyone, two super buys. And I did like Jeff's suggestion there about where these things are available on Kindle. Kindle does offer you teasers of the bigger books, so you can download a chapter or something. That would just do that, because it might be something interesting anyway that you really find fascinating, but it might also just tell you, am I going to get on with this or not? If that's the style of it, maybe this isn't for me. So don't spend your money on it if you really aren't going to get on with it. But my guess is that everyone in this room watching this tonight who hasn't got it and is interested in antennas would find something for them in there. So thank you very much, Lorna, and thank you to all our viewers and our listeners on YouTube. So let me just stop the recording, and now we're going to say goodbye to YouTube. So thank you very much, and hope you enjoyed tonight.